Welcome back to the Ed Show. Today was day 2 of oral arguments before the Supreme Court on whether the individual mandate of the Affordable Health Care Act is constitutional. The big question, does Congress have the power to require people to buy health insurance? Initially, the more conservative justice seemed to side with the opponents of the individual mandate. If the government can force us to buy health insurance, they asked, can it force us to buy cell phones or burial services?
So can the government require you to buy a cell phone because that would facilitate responding when you need emergency services?
You know what you're doing? You are financing your burial services right now because eventually you're going to die and somebody's going to have to pay for it.
Well, the question is that all for the common good? I'll get to that in a moment. The so-called swing vote on the court, Justice Anthony Kennedy also seemed skeptical.
Assume for the moment, you may disagree, assume for the moment that this is unprecedented. This is a step beyond what our cases have allowed. The reason this is concerning is because it requires the individual to do an affirmative act. That changes the relationship of the federal government to the individual in a very fundamental way.
But when lawyers for the opposition spoke, both Justice Kennedy and Chief Justice Roberts explained the government's position pretty well.
But they're in the market in the sense that they're creating a risk that the market must account for.
Everybody is in this market, so that makes it very different than the market for cars or the other hypotheticals that you came up with. And all they're regulating is how you pay for it.
Keep in mind, 4 justices are likely to uphold the law. The government is looking for a 5th justice to rule in its favor. I'm joined tonight by Maryland State Senator Jamie Raskin, also a constitutional law professor at American University and senior fellow for the People for the American Way. Mr. Raskin, good to have you with us tonight.
Delighted to be with you.
You bet. The common good clause in the Constitution, doesn't this come into play? And I want to ask you right off the top, was there anything that really jumped out at you today? How do you think the 5 justices handled all of this, the conservative justices?
The main thing that jumps out at me is that we've got the same partisan lineup that gave us George W. Bush's election in Bush versus Gore and turned corporate treasuries into campaign slush funds in the Citizens United case. There's very little attention being paid to what's really at stake here, which is Congress's power under the Commerce Clause to define the common good and to regulate in the interests of a robust and integrated national economy. Healthcare is 1/6 of our economy. We got 40 million uninsured people out there, and when they go in for uncompensated care, it costs the rest of us billions of dollars. So, I think this is an easy case. It's a simple question, except, of course, it's totally caught up in election year politics. I think we've got some extremely politicized justices who would not dream of handing President Obama a victory in this election year.
Did you consider those statements that we just played pretty political?
Well, it all exists within a political frame.
Yeah.
And the political frame is this is unprecedented. Well, of course it's unprecedented. Every law is unprecedented. The Social Security Act was unprecedented. The National Labor Relations Act was unprecedented. The Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act was unprecedented. OSHA was unprecedented. And in each one, you had right-wingers saying, oh my God, this is unprecedented, it's untested, it's a brave new frontier, it's an infringement of liberty, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, the Supreme Court, when it's thinking straight, has said each of these is totally within Congress's power to regulate interstate commerce. And this goes back to the very beginning of the Republic. In 1824, conservative Chief Justice John Marshall said in a case called Gibbons versus Ogden that the Congress's power under the Commerce Clause is complete. It's plenary. It goes out to the limit, and the only limits on it are those other limits found within the Constitution, like if it violates someone's religious freedom or something.
I mean, if they strike this down, does this undermine a representative government?
Well, of course it does. And this is an historical struggle. It's just like what happened with FDR in the Supreme Court when the Supreme Court was inventing magical new doctrines to undermine Congress's power under the Commerce Clause to give workers the right to organize or to intervene in the agricultural markets. But when we got through all of that, the Supreme Court in a case called Wickard versus Filburn said that, again, that Congress's powers are expansive and great under the Commerce Clause. to deal with all these national emergencies. The irony here, of course, is that the individual mandate, which is so much the subject of political controversy and hatred in the Republican Party now, was a Republican plan. Yeah. I mean, it was hatched at the Heritage Foundation. It was the centerpiece of Romney Care in Massachusetts. Gingrich supported it. And of course, the majority of my party, the Democratic Party, would, I think, prefer to go to a single-payer plan. Raskin. But it was a negotiation and a compromise with the Republican Party and their friends in the insurance industry that gave us the individual insurance mandate.
Mr. Raskin, there's a lot on the bone, no question about it. I appreciate your time tonight. We'll have you back. Thank you. We have more breaking news on the Trayvon Martin case. We'll be right back. Stay with us.